Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Grand Prix Surveillance. My name is Saeed and I'm joined today by Aditya as usual. Now, we've taken a bit of a break from the series, just observing some of the recent races that happened. And we've seen utter Red Bull dominance in all the recent races, especially the double header that happened in Austria a couple of weeks ago. And we came into this weekend for the British GP, hoping to have a little more of a spice, a little bit more of spice added to the championship, the hopes that something might change, something might bring about a little more excitement into the races. We're not talking about the so-called chaotic race that happened yesterday per se, but something new that Formula One actually brought into this weekend, something unique, something that we've seen in spec series and feeder series in the past. And that is, of course, the sprint race. So we thought we'd first dive into that, talk a little bit about what exactly happened this weekend in the sprint race and what the implications are for a potential sprint race combination, maybe sometime later this season or even next year. Personally, I feel it was a very welcome change, a tad bit too long, but I see a lot of potential in the sprint races. But before I get into my opinion, Choco, I'd love to hear what you feel about that.
I mean, sprint racing. Look, I'm a huge fan of sprint racing because I love to follow a lot about the feeder series as well. And what the other series do bring to the table is the fact that you've got spec cars. So you would assume everyone is on the same field. So you want to give everyone is on the same level. So you obviously want to give everyone a chance to bring a win on one of the three races which you have on the particular weekends. But I think this is somewhat antithetical to the concept of Formula One, where in which apparently meritocracy is supposed to win you races with the fastest car which you build and the fastest car which you qualify on. But a lot of it has stagnated in a way that we are not getting what the formula is supposed to deliver. So, in a way, as you say, it could be a welcome change to see a sport grow to another place for the future. So, I mean, with what happened last Saturday for the qualifying race, it's barely indicative of what its truest potential could be. You know what I mean? Because it's just the first race, and it happened on, let's say, a pretty much uh, F1 specific track. If you could do this on a street circuit, we probably would have had a different outcome. But with which we saw with Perez, I mean that literally lost him his entire weekend. So I think it is a game of risk. Which F1 wants to put into it, where in which you have to take your chances to see where you end up. And I think when you look at it, look at Russell. Even though he managed to have a very good qualifying on Friday, he was in a position where he could really be gobbled up by all the rest of the midfield cars during the quali. And yet he landed up in a position which was fairly good, albeit he had a three-place grid penalty, but it did get him in a good position before the penalty. So if you look at it that way, you can take your wins and losses, but I think it's too early for me to say that this is the way to go forward. You know what I mean? Maybe if, as we were talking about like a few minutes ago, like if we have a spec series, maybe, or if the cars are on a little more level playing field, then maybe this can have a drastic effect to actually jumble up the grid. But yeah, only 2022 will tell us about that.
Yeah, I get the fact, I get the idea of them using sprint races, the sprint and then the feature race and all of that in Formula 2 and 3, because of course it's a sheer display of your potential to climb up the pack, especially because they also have the reverse grid system employed in the junior series as well, something that wasn't there in Formula 1. Um, but see, in all things considered, I think here also it was a bit of a test of the driver's skill. You could see this from Fernando Alonso, who in the past has shown some brilliant first laps, some brilliant opening laps. I remember long back when he was in his prime in Ferrari, when I used to watch F1, I would always watch out for what he does, because literally in every race he gains about 5 or 6 spots, generally not having great qualifying runs and then somehow making it up on the first lap. That was something very refreshing to see in a sprint race like this. A lot of people thought that because it's a sprint race, and more so because it's the first one ever, that people are going to be very cautious on the grid. But contrary to that, drivers were really taking risks. And this brings me to a point as to why they decided to start that concept here at the British GP. I've been thinking a bit about this. There's no real specific reason for why they'd want to start here at the track. Of course, that was where F1 technically began, so it kind of makes sense to have a historic start or a potential start. We still don't know if it's taken off fully, but a potential start for a new system included in Formula One. But then, logistically, it makes sense to try this out in Silverstone because a lot of teams are based around the UK. Now, everybody's talking about how a sprint series on Saturday, getting taken out on Saturday, can potentially really cost you a grid start for the next day. We saw this happen with Charles Leclerc as well in Monaco. So maybe because it's in Silverstone, it's a good way to test it, because worst case, if something happens to the chassis, they can always get a backup easily. They can transport a backup car or even backup crew, perhaps, if they need to work overtime. So I think logistically, it made sense to start over then. This is just something I've been thinking about for a while. But if that is the major limitation, this might only get restricted to European races, more so races that are close to the UK, maybe the French GP, maybe the Dutch Grand Prix. But beyond that, the distance traveled in Europe starts increasing. Maybe up till Germany or Spain, but this is a logistical problem as well.
Yeah, and this is what I had thought as well, because it seemed like a perfect place to start. Because apart from the fact that it's easier for teams to have access to, Silverstone, Monza, and the other track we're not sure about, which is going to host the third sprint race, have a lot of access to the infrastructure, the people, the marshals, information, and anything else which they want at real time step away from them. So it really is the best place for it to happen, because everything they want is at a hand's reach. So I think in a way to test it out, this probably would have been the best place. But I get what you're trying to say. I think Monza is the next place where the sprint is going to happen, and the next one is going to happen somewhere at the toe end of the season. So obviously, maybe extra parts and all that would have been shipped already to the other racetrack, which we may not have heard about now. But yeah, I get what you're trying to say, but we'll have to really wait and see, because this is a purpose-built racetrack. A lot of teams know what's going to happen, because when I thought about this in the beginning, I thought the real winners here are going to be the top two, Hamilton and Verstappen, because it gives them a clear indication of how your tires are going to perform for the first leg of the race, which you might take part on Sunday. So Verstappen knew he got in the front, and he knew that if he controlled the pace, he could possibly go for the win. And this was basically what happened on Sunday as well. And one of the biggest things which I'd seen is that if even Fernando Alonso, like even when he didn't get into Q2 on qualifying, but on Friday, he knew that the car had pace. So I think it was fairly easy to say that they could fight. So the real challenge is in the midfield, the bottom pack of the midfield, where they can actually contest for positions based on race pace, and then it's your top two or top three who could basically battle it out for the podiums or the win at the end of the day. So, as I said again, this is Silverstone. This is only one part of a whole triage of events. So we can only wait to see in Monza what we can bring ahead.
But like you said, see, adding to that point, something that you mentioned was that, midfield right now, it's more like a couple of teams in the front battling out for that top spot, and then all the midfield packed together. Literally anybody from McLaren all the way to dare I say Alfa Romeo or AlphaTauri, Alfa Romeo could potentially find themselves in 6th or 5th if they're lucky in certain circumstances. It really shows how much stuff has improved, at least throughout this era. I know we're at the end of another Formula One era, so naturally teams will start getting closely spaced. But we've really stepped away from that position where it's like, you have two, like maybe one team always on the top, the second team always guaranteed the final podium spots, and then it's super segregated, and exactly where people are going to finish. Go back to 2010, you always know the top two spots are for Red Bull, next two spots would always be McLaren, Ferrari would always bag 5th and 6th. That was how it was for a good chunk of the early 2010s. So this is just proven that maybe it is time for Formula One to step ahead to the next era, which, by the way, we got a good taste, a little small taste of the next era in the unveiling of of a spec, a prototype for next year's Formula One 2022 contender. So yeah, it's good to see that we're slowly transitioning, and the next championship battle for the next era is again anyone's game to start with. Talking about the championship battle, it has spiced up a bit after this weekend. A lot of changes have happened. Why don't you take us off with what exactly has majorly changed since the past few rounds?
We have a Mercedes back on the top step of the podium. For the past 5 races, we've had Red Bull winning, which was quite a beautiful streak added to their name. But I think yeah. But this race was quite the roller coaster for Red Bull. Uh, they had a very bad a sprint race with Perez, but I think that really costed his entire race at the end. And the first lap incident with Hamilton really was the nail on the coffin at the end. But really disappointed with a lot of the F1 community, because I've been following what's been happening after that. Whether it's not a racing incident or not, or if it's somebody else's fault, doesn't really matter at this point in time. But I think the F1 community right now is so polarized between us and them. It's Hamilton versus Verstappen, that it kind of subjugates the whole point of Formula One as a community and the real point of racing. Because yeah, okay, fine, I get it. They had an incident, but you can look back into the past and you could have seen that people who are champions are cutthroat. They take no prisoners. You would have seen that with Senna and Prost. They don't whine about it. They probably had a few fisticuffs, but that's okay. But you had Villeneuve Schumacher, 1997, very famous incident. And you had various other incidents with Lewis himself with Nico. You could have seen so many things that have happened, but eventually you come to the situation where you want to divide, stoke fears, and say that you can't do this and you can't do that. I mean, really disappointing words coming from Christian Horner's mouth, saying that you don't go into the corner of cops. I mean, who makes these rules? You wouldn't have said that to Mark Webber when he went up the inside of Fernando Alonso on Rouge. Obviously, you wouldn't do that, but. Yeah, I get it, but I think the point of talking about who at fault it was, I think the stewards deemed the decision. They slapped him with the penalty, and he came back and he answered. Whether it was what do you say, unsportsmanlike is highly debatable. I think I would just put that to rest, saying that it's only his opinions. I don't really care much about it, but I think Red Bull really have to look at this race and say that, okay, fine, this was bad, but we need to move on. Because you clearly see that when you're fighting with someone like Lewis Hamilton for the championship, he may let you get away at some parts of time, but eventually he ain't going to take no prisoners. And Max is no exception. This is getting very spicy. Not like to quote like DTS content and shit like that, but Lewis wants to win, and he's not going to get away. He's going to make Max go away easily with it, and I'm ready to watch that, and I'm so game to see it get through.
This is what we were hoping for, and I think this is irrespective of whether people want to put the blame on either one of the two drivers for that incident. One thing's for sure, deep down inside, this is what we're all looking for. We're looking for a championship battle where drivers are not going to back off. They're going to do everything they can. They know how important every single point on track is. And this just shows the caliber of both those drivers going into that corner. High speed, high downforce. They know you need to get that position on lap number 1.
Exactly.
The Merc wants to get ahead because they can pull away in straight line. The Red Bull wants to get ahead because they know the Mercs will destroy their tires following them thereafter. So it's all a strategy game. All things considered, there could be a fault blame. Many say it's 50-50. Some might disagree with that. I'm not going to specifically say what I think about it. I mean, we could
let's go for it. Let's take it at face value. Okay, let's not come and say that this is the ultimatum with my opinion. Obviously, it's not true. We don't have opinions like that. We can have conflating arguments, but sure, let's talk about it though. don't say fault. What do you think? What do you think could have happened otherwise? Hamilton backing off,
Yeah.
or Verstappen giving space? Because the arguments right now comes into this situation where I would say Verstappen is not going to back off because he's a racing driver and he wants to win. Hamilton's going to say, I saw a gap and I went for it. You can't have these two arguments and say, now it now comes out to the question of who's smarter, who wants to live to fight another day. Hamilton obviously came out of it with a better thing, but this is where you're going to have the real argument now. Could this have been prevented? Of course.
Could it have been prevented? Yes. If well, there are two ways to look at it. If either of the drivers had backed off in a way, it could have been avoided. If Max had taken a wider line and Lewis had stuck to a narrower, a shallower line, not shallower, rather a tighter line, it could have been avoided. Yes, but let's try to go through this, logically, break down the entire incident. What happened? Okay, these guys went through Woodcourt, Luffield, got onto the Hamilton Straight. So it's called the Hamilton Straight. And they get onto that, which is really cool, by the way. Like, I think this is the first time in this era we're seeing a great driver of this era having a section of the track named after him. So yeah, anyways.
Truly legendary times.
Exactly. It's actually so cool to say that to have your name on a track like that really seals the deal that you are one of the greats of the sport. That aside, of course, they get onto the Hamilton Straight, which is actually quite small. It's not really a straight. It's just the old pit straight, right? Which is not really that much. It's just a little bit of run up into what is, as Christian Horner has said, one of the fastest corners in the entire F1 calendar, and arguably one of the most exciting ones, one of the highest downforce corners. Now, Max had the outer line. Lewis was behind him, had the slipstream, pulled over to the inside, to the right side, just a little bit before the original start-finish line, right? Now, when they entered the corner, before the braking zone, they were kind of neck and neck, but even then, I think Verstappen was slightly ahead. Now, people say that Hamilton was clearly behind or a good distance behind. And like, it might seem like that from that replay perspective, right? From the grandstand perspective. But the fact of the matter is Hamilton might have backed off a bit earlier, which is why by the time they reached Copse per se, when they started turning in, he was a little bit behind. Now, I think the incident would have been avoided. So see, if the only reason the collision happened, no, I'm saying even if they stuck to the same lines that happened now, it would have been avoided. The only problem is it looks as though Hamilton might have just gotten a bit of unexpected understeer, which hit them. Hit Verstappen, because Verstappen had a lot of room, had his own line. Hamilton had more than enough space on the inside. So it's just in that way, I can truly understand that it's just a racing incident, because in the first lap, the understeer is really unpredictable. So it wasn't massive understeer. It wasn't a driver error. It was just a misjudgment from both parties and some unfortunate understeer that played its part. It's physics. That's it.
100%. That's a very good reasoning to it. But and I think the most common thing what Sky or anybody else would come up and argue, saying that probably biased fans for both the sides. So come and say they would show you the overtake which Hamilton took on Leclerc and the overtake which he took on Verstappen. So the key difference here is that he overtook Verstappen on lap number 49. He tried to overtake Verstappen on Leclerc on lap number 49, Verstappen on lap number 1. On lap number 1, your tires may not be as hot as you want it to be, and you're running 105 kgs of fuel. So your car's really not at the best of the performance while it could be when you're racing on lap number 49. Secondly, Hamilton was really squeezed. I mean, he decided to take the inside, which was completely his right to take, which was he got the space. But even before getting into Copse, he was on the inside and he was squeezed towards the wall. And we all know going into Copse, you have to be on the left to get the best line coming out of the corner, going into Maggots and Beckett's. So I think that the part where Hamilton, both the cars were on the racing line, truly affected the way they got into the corner. Now, as you said, the car was obviously heavier for Lewis, and he did slightly outbrake himself, and he caught the understeer. But I think when people say that Lewis was on the inside, I think the technical term of it was saying before getting into the corner. Copse is a sweeping right-hander, which is not just small. You have to go around it for a little while. So when I think people saying that Lewis was on the inside, it was right at the braking zone, which did make sense. Because before going into cops, they were at the same place. While it's a sweeping right-hander, Verstappen could brake later and still carry on because there is runoff, there is a little extra space on the track. But Hamilton has to really go in very tight. Now, I look back at Verstappen's feet and I really saw that Hamilton was near his mirrors or near his barge boards or whatever you want to call it. And Verstappen saw it, he corrected it, and he swept in again. You could argue that he could have given him a little space, and if he would have given him a little space, Hamilton probably would have got through into Maggots and Beckett's, which is, let's say, a hypothetical situation which we can never talk about now. But he decided to do it. A smart driver possibly wouldn't have done that because they already saw him in the mirror. And this is my only take on it. But right now, it's lap number 1, and let's say it's a championship and you want to take no prisoners. I think the end of the story about this is that when stewards make a decision, they don't make a wholehearted decision completely based on the outcome of the event. It was in the act that caused the event. So when people come up and say, that Lewis needs to be banned for a race. Well, obviously, you don't have to take it seriously. It's fucking help Marco. Or he has to come and say he needs a harsher penalty. This was the penalty that was appropriate because Hamilton did serve his 10 seconds and he won the race. Okay, it couldn't be more poetic. And I think now the end of the days, Red Bull is unhappy because they just didn't want Hamilton to win or get good points. That's the only argument they have to it. But I'm saying again, racing incident, just like Imola, same, Silverstone, racing incident.
Exactly. From Verstappen's perspective, he went into cops, saw Hamilton in the mirror. He did give him space. Yeah, if you see the replay, Hamilton had enough space for his own car and a bit more between him and Verstappen. So at that point, it's more of who's committed to their line more. Pure technical terms, Verstappen had the racing line and was slightly ahead at the corner. So,
but they weren't on the racing line.
Actually, neither were really, because in the beginning there really is no racing line per se. You're right. Neither of them was on the racing line. But I think it's again really difficult to get more deep into this without being biased on either side. The more I look at those videos, the more I understand the steward's decision, and also to an extent understand that it is a racing incident. After all, in situations like this, the driver who is hit from the back, who is behind, who created the contact per se, is generally at fault, especially in racing conditions like this. Because it's not like Verstappen purposely swerved to cut across, to purposely cut off. He was trying to take the corner as well. And like you said, we have to take this very logically. It's very unfortunate that Verstappen had a seriously high speed, high deceleration impact. It's an impulsive force that acted on him. It wasn't just a gradual deceleration.
He sounded really bad after.
I know. They didn't broadcast the radio, but later on I saw YouTube video of the radio, and
it was bad.
It was scary. It was scary. It was just as scary as Grosjean's crash, if you look at it as in terms of emotion. He was winded. He was struggling for breath. It was very obvious. And then he had to go to the hospital. So very unfortunate what happened to him. Understandably, he's gutted. Yeah, just wanted to conclude saying that you're right. Stewards cannot make a decision based on the end outcome. At the crash, somebody gets the worst end of the stick. They need to make it based on the incident itself. So 10 seconds is appropriate for that. There are only a list of 5-6 penalties you can give in the race. Was it disqualification warranted? I think not. But again, it's not our decision. It's the stewards' decisions. They know better than others for an incident like this.
Yeah, I agree. For all it's worth, Max can have his opinions. Max is flustered. He doesn't want to be in that situation, and I get it. He wants to win a championship. He's been waiting 7 years for it, and he's been given a car which can do it. And he knows this is his year, and he needs to capitalize on every opportunity he wants. But I have no problem with him voicing out his opinions. He is completely fine, and he's right to do so. What I have a problem with is Red Bull taking up a load of shit and steering a pot with it. And it caused a lot of problems after the race, a lot of racism, a lot of bad remarks, a lot of it made the sport go right. And it's something that you don't want to see, right? In a time where Lewis is fighting so much to not say have civil conversations about racism and abuse and inclusivity into the sport, this shit happens, and it's sad to see because we grow as communities, and you don't want to dilute it with the things that don't make it important. And I think that was my takeaway from it. Like Lewis can do whatever he
Very,
wanted.
very
I mean, the crash
unfortunate.
was it.
The reactions
Yeah,
from everybody is very unfortunate. But we just hope that everything goes back to racing as it should. That is the only reason we all watch the sport. We love the racing.
yeah,
And at the bottom line, that's what it's got
absolutely.
to be about. And I hope everyone, calms down and looks at this more rationally and kind of goes ahead, because I think that's best for everybody. And it's inevitably going to go that way. Let's hope people keep staying strong to
Well,
their
that's what they're
stride.
trying to do.
Yeah, their stride in making the sport much better than what it currently is.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
if you want to wear the brand V Race has won, you got to do a better job. That's the end. That's the end of the story for me at this. But before we end, bro, really good performances by Charles Leclerc and Lando Norris and McLaren. They really made sure that they got something out of this race. I mean, Carlos Sainz too. After what was quite a awful sprint race, I think he did manage to, and I mean, feeling a little frustrated that he couldn't overtake Ricardo, but yeah, Ricardo's no easy target at the end of the day. But yeah,
good to see that, considering that
yeah, really
Carlos Sainz
happy.
has had some pretty torrid races this year, all the way up and down, all over the place. This is good to again see him
Yeah,
back
exactly.
in a positive step forward.
No, he's good. No, I think Carlos Sainz and Ferrari are in good shape. I think better than probably the best driver switch which has happened this year. I think he's got along quite well with the team, quite well with the car, and I think I'm happy for that team because 1 year ago, dude, this this team was in shambles, if not worse. And to come back here and to pull these kind of performances, I think is brilliant. But I'm not taking away the fact that Ferrari did manage to hold its cool during the race because they did face a lot of issues,
Oh
a
yeah,
lot
big
of
shout
engine
out
mapping issues.
for the
Yeah,
engineers as well, who were able to dynamically
yeah,
solve that remotely solve that electronics problem on Leclerc's ERS system. So on and his
you're
ERS
a race engineer.
configuration.
Tell me, is it as easy as what control or delete and refresh? Is that kind of thing how it works?
Honestly, it's
I mean,
very
that's what
specific.
Crofty
It's
says. I'm
obviously
not.
specific to the program. Depends on how they have
Yeah,
programmed it. But yeah, debugging code is no easy task. Okay,
true.
even if you've completely set up your code properly, uh, if there's a bug and you never faced it till then, it's even more difficult to capture it, let alone when you face a
I
bug
know.
initially right after creating a program. So yeah, I mean, the electronics in a Formula One car are just so much more complex. There's so many gigabytes of data just being transmitted all across the circuit constantly across, I mean, from every single car's transponder to the back to the pit wall. So there's just too much data, so many things going on. Now, why this happened, we don't know. I mean, electronics and coding, as accurate and fast as it is, it's still fickle at times. And yeah, it's still great to see teams actively working. This just shows the fans how much
Yeah,
work is going on in the background as well. The drivers really do most of the work, and they really do a great job. But there's also a lot of other stuff going on in the background, and sometimes it's
yeah,
nice for someone technical like me to also kind of see that being broadcasted. But yeah, like they say, at the end of the race, how Lewis says it's a team effort. It really is true. And I think that's what makes the sport so awesome. It's just so many types of professions and occupations and skill sets coming together. It's no easy task to get a monster machine like this churning out nearly 1,000 horsepower to do
I
300
swear.
kilometers in a span of 1.5 hours. So yeah, I think it was great to see that from the Ferrari crew, and like kudos to Leclerc for keeping his head cool and just, he's one of the most level-headed drivers
Yeah.
out there. If you've seen him, there's some problem, he gets on with it. Another driver who does that usually is
Mm,
Daniel Ricciardo. He makes a mistake or something's
that's
wrong,
true.
he just bites the bullet and continues going. So yeah.
Yeah. Pizza, pizza, baby. Let's go. That's good. Yeah, but Good. Like I'm really happy that Ferrari did manage to fudge this entire race up. I mean, they have a problem with Sainz pit stop, which he then recovered. He could have possibly finished fourth or fifth, but that's hypothetical. Now we can't really talk about it. But yeah, I think altogether with the amount of problems they were thrust into, yeah, they did hold their guns up high, whatever you call it.
Lot of
Anyway,
surprising
before we
races,
end,
surprise results coming up.
yeah,
There were so many in the past. There's the less than half the season is over. There's a lot more coming up.
I know it's so much happening. I'm really excited to see it. And before we end, winners and losers. What's your take on that?
Apart from the obvious, on track, who lost out the most? If you look at midfield, Vettel unfortunately had a bit of a spin in the beginning. But again, if that's on his own accord, then that was quite unfortunate. Another person, I don't recall exactly where George Russell finished, but I'm assuming he might have lost out big time from all the restarts. There were two starts for the race essentially because of the red flag.
Right.
You see him to have.
That's true.
He is. Where is he? So I'm just trying to search. Yeah, so he's down all the way down in 70. He's back in. I think he was.
He's back in true form.
Sorry, I'm looking at the driver standings. But yeah,
Sunday is just not his day, is it?
Yeah, it's. I mean, I really I don't know. A lot of people want to see him in Mercedes. I don't really specifically want to see him in Mercedes or anything, but I want to see him in a better car. He is a GP2 champion, Formula 2 champion.
Yeah.
He deserves more. He got a 12th place, which is still good. But I really so desperately want to see him in the points. Who else gained big time? Alonso really held his ground. I didn't think he's gonna stay at a relatively high position through the race, so he did pretty well. Ricardo, one of the best drives he's had from McLaren. Overall, the biggest winner as a team, no doubt Mercedes for winning the race, but I think McLaren were the biggest. Were the guys who took, or were the team that took away the biggest hoard of points as a whole, you know.
Yeah, when you're battling with Ferrari, when they're not really together in a lot of races, McLaren come together and bagging good points. I think that was very good. But yeah, Ferrari as well had a very good weekend too. Even though they had a little awful quali with Sainz, I think they did end up in a good place. I think biggest loser, needless to say, Max Verstappen. Anybody else who I think really was on the receiving end of it? Yeah, I think Antonio Giovinazzi. Antonio Giovinazzi had a really good start to the weekend. He qualified in the top 10 on Friday, and then he had an okay race. And then it just comes back to the usual where Giovinazzi is behind Raikkonen. I think he was behind Raikkonen this race, but he probably thinks he could have done better because, if you look at Giovinazzi's performance, he's consistently been out qualifying Raikkonen, and when it comes to the race, he just goes all the way down. So yeah, I think a lot to look forward to there. Biggest winner, Michael Massey, bro, is a legend. I think he's probably the biggest winner on the race weekend, dishing out good calls and telling Toto that he doesn't look at his emails while he's racing. Tells you about true responsibility, the kind of stuff which we want to see at the top line of motorsport.
Good banter going on there. I know Michael Massey has been getting a lot of I wouldn't say hate, but a lot of negativity ever since he assumed his position. I mean, it's good to see that he's
done a very good job.
He's slowly growing.
He's always done a very good job.
He's really slowly growing into the shoes of Charlie Whiting, taking everything that he learned from him and really trying to apply it.
When people say that they want to give slack to Michael Massey, they don't understand who really holds positions of power when it happens in a race. Michael Massey takes care of the race, the safety for some parts of the track, and the race procedures. Anything that happens, any incidents, the shots. The ones who are calling the shots on incidents and other activities that happen on track are done by the race stewards, which is not Massey's job. And Massey has done everything that was important to make sure the race went well. And he's been doing that consistently. Maybe a little, or maybe an off decision here and there would have got him that slack, but not in the way which you say right now. So yeah, I guess let's see, bro. What's happening in Hungaro Ring next week?
Oh yeah, fast track, a lot of fun. Looking forward to it.
Cheerio.